All right, let's get right into it. Here's a question you might not have thought about. Why do people pray, even when they don't consider themselves religious? Think about that for a second, because it's a little bit strange, right? You've probably seen it happen. Maybe you've even done it yourself. You're in a tough situation, something heavy is weighing on your mind, like a loved one's health, a big decision, or even just a moment of deep uncertainty. And suddenly, without even thinking, you find yourself whispering something to the universe. Something like, please let this go right, or I don't know what to do, help me. But here's the thing, you don't go to church every Sunday. You don't follow any particular religious rituals. You don't even identify as someone who believes in a higher power. So why, in that moment, did you pray? What are we doing when we reach out to something or someone that we're not even sure is there? Let's break this down, because this is one of those questions that digs deep into human nature. First, we need to understand what prayer actually is. In its simplest form, prayer is communication. It's reaching out beyond yourself. And the truth is, humans are wired to communicate, even when we're feeling isolated or overwhelmed. When you're in a moment of crisis, when the pressure is on, your brain is searching for some kind of connection, some sense that you're not alone in whatever you're facing. And sometimes prayer is that instinctive way of creating a link between you and, well, something bigger. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't subscribe to any religious system, that instinct to pray still comes up. And it's not just a random thing that happens sometimes. We see it all over the world, across different cultures, in people who wouldn't describe themselves as religious. So why? What are we really doing when we pray, especially if we don't even believe in the traditional idea of a deity? One reason might be tied to the way we handle uncertainty.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Let's face it, life is unpredictable. No matter how much control we like to think we have, there's always something beyond our grasp. Maybe it's a medical diagnosis. Maybe it's whether or not someone we love will stay with us. Maybe it's something as simple as being stuck in traffic when we're late for an important meeting. Our brains don't like uncertainty. It makes us feel vulnerable. And in those moments of vulnerability, we naturally want some kind of reassurance, some kind of hope that things will turn out okay. Prayer, even for the non-religious, can be a way of managing that uncertainty. It's like a release valve for all the anxiety and fear that builds up when we realize we're not in control. When you pray, you're essentially acknowledging that there are forces at play that are bigger than you. You're throwing your hands up and saying, I can't do this alone. Even if you don't believe in a traditional God, just the act of verbalizing that feeling can bring some comfort. It's like talking to the universe or fate or whatever you think might be out there. And that moment of release can help you feel like, okay, maybe things will be all right. But here's something deeper. What if prayer is more than just about seeking comfort? What if it's also a way of connecting with parts of ourselves that we don't always pay attention to? Think about this when you pray, whether you're religious or not, what's actually happening inside you? You're slowing down. You're focusing on something that's bothering you or worrying you. You're taking a moment to reflect on your life, your choices, and where you are in the world. In that sense, prayer can be a kind of self-examination. It's you talking to yourself in a way, but through the lens of something bigger. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. Some psychologists believe that prayer, even for the non-religious, can be a tool for tapping into a deeper part of our subconscious. And when you're praying, you're often expressing hopes, fears, and desires that you might not even fully understand or acknowledge in your everyday life. In a strange way, prayer can bring those hidden thoughts to the surface. It's like you're opening a door into your own mind, into the things that you might push aside when you're caught up in the busyness of life. If you've ever prayed in a moment of desperation, even as someone who doesn't consider themselves religious, you might have felt something similar. It's not just about asking for help, it's about clarifying what you're really feeling, what you're really worried about. It's like the words themselves help you make sense of everything swirling around inside. And sometimes, that's all we really need, a moment to pause, to speak those worries out loud, and to feel like we've been heard, even if we're not sure by whom. But why does prayer make us feel something, even if we're not religious? Why does it seem to have real emotional power, even for the skeptic? This is where it gets really interesting. Studies have shown that when people pray, certain parts of the brain light up, specifically the areas associated with self, reflection, emotional regulation, and social connection. Essentially, when we pray, we're engaging the parts of our brain that help us process emotions and make sense of our place in the world. That's why prayer can feel so powerful. Even if we don't believe in a God, it's not just about reaching out to something external. It's about tapping into something internal. And there's more. Prayer, for many people, has a physical and emotional effect. It can slow your heart rate, calm your breathing, and reduce stress. Even if you don't think you're communicating with a divine being, the act of prayer itself, taking a quiet moment, focusing on something meaningful to you, can have a real physiological impact. In a way, prayer can function almost like a form of meditation or mindfulness. It pulls you out of the chaos of daily life, if only for a moment, and lets you center yourself. But here's something crucial we need to talk about: the idea of hope. When people pray, especially in moments of crisis, they're often reaching out for hope. And hope is a powerful thing. You don't have to be religious to want hope. In fact, hope might be one of the most fundamental human needs. We all want to believe that things can get better, that there's a way forward, even when things look dark. Prayer, even for the non-religious, can be a way of holding on to that hope. It's like saying, I don't know how this will turn out, but I'm hoping for the best. And sometimes that's enough to keep us going. But here's a question for you: if prayer is so tied to hope, does that mean we're all, in some way, believers? Not necessarily in a traditional God, but in something bigger than ourselves. Could it be that, deep down, even the most skeptical among us have this need to reach out to something beyond what we can see and touch? And if that's true, what does that say about human nature? So we've started to uncover why even non-religious people pray. This deep-seated need for hope, comfort, and a sense of control when life throws curveballs. But what if prayer isn't just about reaching out to something out there? What if it's more about something inside us? Let's think about it. Humans are social creatures. We're wired for connection. From the day we're born, we rely on others, not just for survival, but for emotional support, for validation, for meaning. We need to know we're not alone. This need for connection goes beyond just talking to friends or family. It extends into how we understand our place in the universe. When you pray, even if you're not religious, you're engaging in a kind of conversation. And maybe that conversation is less about God and more about you. Let's dig deeper into this. When you're praying, what are you really doing? You're reflecting. You're expressing your feelings, your fears, your desires. You're taking everything that's swirling around inside, the stuff you might not feel comfortable saying to another person, and you're giving it voice. In a way, you're connecting with your own inner world, your subconscious. Maybe that's the real power of prayer. It's not about whether or not you believe in a deity, it's about the fact that you're giving yourself permission to express the things you might normally keep bottled up. Let's think about it. Humans are social creatures. We're wired for connection. From the day we're born, we rely on others, not just for survival, but for emotional support, for validation, for meaning. We need to know we're not alone. This need for connection goes beyond just talking to friends or family. It extends into how we understand our place in the universe. When you pray, even if you're not religious, you're engaging in a kind of conversation. And maybe that conversation is less about God and more about you. Let's dig deeper into this. When you're praying, what are you really doing? You're reflecting. You're expressing your feelings, your fears, your desires. You're taking everything that's swirling around inside, the stuff you might not feel comfortable saying to another person, and you're giving it voice. In a way, you're connecting with your own inner world, your subconscious. Maybe that's the real power of prayer. It's not about whether or not you believe in a deity, it's about the fact that you're giving yourself permission to express the things you might normally keep bottled up. And this is where prayer, even for the non-religious, can act as a form of emotional release. When you're praying, you're not just saying words, you're pouring out your heart. You're expressing things that might be too heavy or too complex to share with another human being. And in that act of expression, there's a kind of catharsis. You're letting go of some of the emotional weight you've been carrying. We all need that release from time to time. Life is hard. It's full of pressures, uncertainties, and challenges. We're constantly juggling responsibilities, dealing with relationships, managing expectations, and sometimes it can feel like too much. In those moments, prayer can be a way of stepping outside of the chaos, even if just for a few minutes. It's a way of saying, I can't control everything, and that's okay. Whether you believe in God or not, that act of letting go, of surrendering control, can be incredibly freeing. But here's an important question: if prayer is about connection, who or what are we really trying to connect with? Is it about connecting with God, or is it about connecting with ourselves? What if prayer is a way of accessing a deeper part of our own consciousness, a part that we don't always tap into in our everyday lives? Psychologists have suggested that when we pray, we're often engaging in a kind of self-dialogue. We're talking to ourselves, but in a way that feels less self-centered, less about ego. When we pray, we're able to step outside of our normal thought patterns and see things from a different perspective. We can ask ourselves the big questions: what do I really want? What am I afraid of? What's holding me back? In a sense, prayer can help us clarify our own thoughts and feelings. And here's something really profound. What if prayer, even for the non-religious, is a way of searching for meaning? We live in a world that's often chaotic, confusing, and overwhelming. We're constantly bombarded with information, with choices, with noise. It's easy to feel lost in all of that. Prayer can be a way of cutting through the noise, of finding a moment of stillness where we can reflect on what really matters. Even if you don't believe in a traditional God, the act of prayer can help you focus on the things that are most important to you. In that way, prayer is less about religion and more about values. When you pray, you're often thinking about the things that matter most: your family, your health, your future, your purpose. You're asking for guidance, for clarity, for strength to face whatever challenges lie ahead. And that process, even if it's not directed at a deity, can be incredibly meaningful. But here's another layer to consider. What if prayer is also about humility? When we pray, we're acknowledging that we don't have all the answers. We're admitting that there are things beyond our control, things we can't fully understand. And that's a humbling experience, especially in a world where we're often encouraged to believe that we can control everything if we just work hard enough, plan well enough, or think smart enough. Prayer, in a way, is a reminder that we're human. We're not all powerful. We're not all knowing. And that's okay. In fact, that's part of what makes life beautiful. If we knew everything, if we had total control, there wouldn't be any mystery, any wonder, any growth. Prayer, even for the non-religious, can be a way of embracing that uncertainty, of recognizing that there's more to life than what we can see or understand in any given moment. Here's a deep question for you. What if the act of prayer itself is more important than whether or not anyone is listening? What if prayer is valuable because of what it does for us, how it helps us process our emotions, clarify our thoughts, and embrace the unknown? I want you to really think about that. When you pray, even if you don't believe in God, you're engaging in a process that can bring you closer to yourself. It's a moment of introspection, a pause in the rush of daily life, a chance to reflect on what really matters to you. And in a world that's constantly pulling us in a million different directions, that kind of reflection is incredibly valuable. But here's where it gets tricky. If prayer is so powerful, why don't more people, especially non-religious folks, do it regularly? Why do so many of us only turn to prayer in moments of crisis or desperation? Could it be that we're afraid of what we might find when we really stop and reflect? Could it be that prayer, even for the non-religious, forces us to confront parts of ourselves that we don't always want to face? Think about it. When you pray, you're often dealing with some of the most difficult, uncomfortable emotions: fear, uncertainty, doubt. Prayer forces you to acknowledge that you're vulnerable, that you don't have all the answers. And that can be scary. But it can also be incredibly liberating. Because when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, when you admit that you need help or guidance, you open yourself up to growth. You create space for change, for healing, for transformation. And maybe that's the real power of prayer. It's not about whether or not you believe in a God. It's about the fact that prayer helps you connect with yourself, with your deepest values, and with the things that matter most in your life. It's a way of finding meaning in the midst of uncertainty, of creating hope in the face of fear. All right, here's where we're really going to dive deep. We've already talked about how prayer, even for people who aren't religious, can be a way of seeking comfort, releasing emotions, and connecting with something, whether that's God, the universe, or even just ourselves. But now let's step back and think about prayer as a tool for self-discovery. Because in a world that's constantly changing, constantly presenting new challenges, maybe what we're really searching for in those moments of prayer is a deeper understanding of who we are. Let me ask you something. How often do you sit down and genuinely reflect on your life, your choices, your purpose? Not in a superficial way, but really dig into it. For most of us, the answer is probably not as often as we should. Life moves fast. We're all busy. We've got responsibilities, deadlines, distractions. And in the middle of all that noise, it's easy to lose track of ourselves. It's easy to go through the motions without ever stopping to think, what am I really doing here? What do I want out of this life? Prayer, in a way, can be a forced moment of reflection. Even if you don't believe in God, the very act of praying makes you stop. It makes you focus. It makes you think about what's going on inside you. And maybe that's part of the reason why people pray when they're not religious. Because at its core, prayer is a moment of stillness in a world that's constantly in motion. It's a chance to slow down, to take stock of where you are, and to ask yourself the big questions that we so often avoid. Here's the thing. We all have an inner world that's rich, complex, and sometimes confusing. There are parts of ourselves that we don't always understand, our fears, our desires, our motivations. And the truth is, it's hard to navigate that inner world on our own. We need tools to help us make sense of it, to help us understand what's really going on beneath the surface. For some people, meditation serves that purpose. For others, it's journaling, therapy, or deep conversations with friends. But for many, whether they realize it or not, prayer can be one of those tools. Now, I want you to think about this when you're praying, especially in moments of crisis or uncertainty. What are you really asking for? Maybe you're asking for something specific, a solution to a problem, guidance in making a decision, or strength to get through a tough time. But if you dig a little deeper, what you're really asking for might be clarity. You're asking for some kind of insight into your situation, into yourself. You're asking to see things in a new light, to find meaning in what you're going through. And here's where prayer gets even more interesting. When you pray, you're not just expressing your thoughts and feelings, you're also listening. You're opening yourself up to the possibility that there's something to be learned from this moment, from this challenge, from this experience. Even if you're not religious, even if you don't believe in a higher power, the act of prayer puts you in a state of receptivity. It's like you're saying to the universe, I'm ready to hear what I need to hear. I'm ready to learn whatever lesson this situation has to offer. This is where prayer becomes a tool for self-discovery. It's not just about asking for help or expressing your feelings. It's about being open to what you might discover about yourself in the process. And that's huge. Because the more you understand yourself, your fears, your desires, your strengths, your weaknesses, the more equipped you are to navigate the ups and downs of life. But here's a question that goes even deeper. What if prayer is a way of helping us confront our deepest truths? Think about it. When you're praying, especially in those really raw, vulnerable moments, you're often forced to acknowledge things about yourself that you might not want to face. Maybe it's a fear that's been lurking in the background for a while. Maybe it's a decision you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a truth about your life that you haven't wanted to admit. Prayer, even for the non-religious, can bring those things to the surface. It can force you to confront the things that you've been running from. And that's not easy. In fact, it can be downright uncomfortable, but it's also incredibly valuable. Because when we confront our deepest truths, when we face those fears, those uncertainties, those difficult emotions, we open ourselves up to growth. We give ourselves the opportunity to change, to evolve, to become the person we're meant to be. Here's something I want to throw out there. What if prayer, at its essence, is about transformation? Not in the sense of becoming someone completely different, but in the sense of becoming more fully yourself. When you pray, you're not just asking for things to change in the world around you. You're also opening yourself up to the possibility of change within yourself. You're saying, I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to grow. I'm ready to become the person I need to be to face whatever is coming next. And here's where we get to the heart of why so many people, even non-religious people, turn to prayer in difficult moments. Because deep down, we all want to believe that there's a purpose to our struggles. We want to believe that the challenges we face aren't just random, meaningless events, but opportunities for growth, for learning, for transformation. Prayer, even if it's not directed at a traditional God, can be a way of affirming that belief. It's a way of saying, I don't understand why this is happening, but I trust that there's something for me to learn here. Here's a question that might make you pause. Do you think that, even if you don't believe in a higher power, the act of prayer can still help you tap into a deeper sense of purpose? Could it be that prayer, even for the non-religious, is a way of finding meaning in the midst of chaos? Because here's the truth, meaning is something we all crave. We want to believe that our lives matter, that our struggles have purpose, that there's something bigger guiding us, even if that something is just our own inner wisdom, our own capacity for growth and change. And prayer, in its simplest form, is a way of reaching out for that meaning. It's a way of asking, what's the point of all this? What am I supposed to learn from this experience? How can I use this challenge to become a better, stronger, more compassionate version of myself? And here's the beautiful thing, even if you don't believe in God, the act of asking those questions, of seeking that meaning, can bring you closer to the answers. It can help you see your life, your challenges, your struggles in a new light. It can help you find the strength and clarity you need to keep moving forward. So let's bring this full circle. Why do people pray, even when they're not religious? Maybe it's because, at its core, prayer isn't really about God. It's about us. It's about our need for connection, for hope, for meaning. It's about our desire to make sense of the world, to find purpose in our struggles, to understand ourselves on a deeper level. And maybe that's the ultimate takeaway here. Prayer, whether you're religious or not, is a profoundly human act. It's a way of reaching out, both to the universe and to ourselves. It's a way of seeking hope, finding comfort, and, most importantly, discovering who we really are.